engage strongly in the art of argument. 3,000 years ago, rhetoric was taught at the center of higher education and essential to leadership. After all, it helped create the world's first democracies, train the likes of Julius Caesar, and inspired William Shakespeare, and was studied by every single one of America's founders. So where did this vast amount of previously esteemed knowledge go? Well, in the 1800s, social scientists dismissed the notion that an individual could stand up to the unwavering forces of history. And well, in the words of Thank You for Arguing author Jay Heinrichs, who wants to teach leadership when academia doesn't believe in leaders? I didn't personally stumble across this lost art form until I took an AP Language and Composition class, where rhetoric seemed to be at the center of our curriculum. Of course, we'd been taught persuasion in the form of 5-paragraph essays before, but never before had I learned about how Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos can help me convince my opponent through credibility, emotion, and logic. Never before had I been taught that sometimes conceding to your opponent's points can actually give you more power in an argument. And never before had I gotten into a heated debate with a teacher over a Spider-Man movie. That was an interesting class. Educational, but interesting. But I'm not here to bore you through several long English classes. I'm here in light of a more pressing issue. The issue is that this information was not already known to you. What has our world lost now that manipulation is considered inherently manipulative and negative and villainous? Now that we have shifted the purpose of an argument from getting your means to just one-upping your opponent. Now that argument and fight have become synonymous. For me personally, I spent a great portion of my academic career in disagreement with someone. In Model UN, in debate club, in recess with friends. Today, I'm here to talk to you about what I got out of it and what it can mean for you. Let me pose a scenario from my own life. I'm in Model UN playing Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, in disagreement with Achilles, the legendary Greek hero from mythology. Not exactly the scenario you'd expect to hear about, considering the historic timelines don't even line up, but that's okay. My mom says I have to learn to let things go. We are discussing whether a bridge should be built to the underworld. In a rhetorical situation, this is what we'd call an exigence, an existing problem that can be solved by human interaction. Think climate change, racism, or even lack of funding for a school club that leads you to have to sell roses with pickup lines to get out of the red zone. Even though hypothetically these problems do have a fix out there somewhere, there are often constraints, like funding or bigoted people that make them difficult to solve. But this doesn't mean that conversation and argument about it should end. If anything, it's more important than ever. Okay, so we've got a problem, and Achilles and I are already very clearly in argument with different viewpoints, which is slightly caused by Achilles being out of character, but today we choose peace. What do we do now? Well, according to the rules of rhetoric, the next step is to decide what the goal of the argument is, whether it's a blame, values, or choice, and concurrently whether the argument should be fought in the past, present, or future. I decide it's a choice, since we are deciding whether to put down a bridge. But Achilles seems to have interpreted this in a different way, going for blame. He repeatedly tears down my reputation as a character, believing he is gaining credibility points by doing so, while I stick adamantly to the future implications of putting down the bridge. At the end, the audience finds that Achilles has misdirected the argument, and my directive is passed. Because even when they don't have voting power, that is the biggest component of rhetoric, swaying the audience. This is something I've been applying to you, my audience, throughout my retelling of the scenario. By telling you selective details of what was otherwise a very lovely conference, you believe that the organizers there gave me a bad experience. I tore down their ethos, their credibility, and without the other side here to defend it, I successfully swayed my audience. Either that, or you think I'm a whiny brat now. That's up to you to decide. Imagine if we applied this to our world, not just in diplomatic meetings, but in conversations with family, friends, and significant others. If we defined what an argument meant to us beforehand, no need to use the rigid blame, value, choice structure, but just thinking, After this, I want my partner to stop sleeping with their socks on. That's all. This wouldn't allow the argument to spiral out of control, to become a he said, she said scenario. A constructive argument, where as long as your needs are met, you are the winner of the argument. Not only can it help you sway the mindset of others, but rhetoric can actually help you defend your own mind against the flawed arguments of others. Politicians and people in power, more often than not, are experts at what rhetoricians call fallacies, flawed logical arguments that, unless you know otherwise, you would accept as valid points in an argument. One such example is the slippery slope, taking something very normal and making it look extreme. Something like, if we let our kids dress as they please, next thing you know, they'll be doing drugs. I used quite the extreme example there, but on a micro scale, it can actually be quite convincing. It's important to be aware of these fallacies so we don't fall victim to terrible logic and groupthink. I hope I have won my argument against you here today and convinced you of the need to bring back rhetoric into modern society on some level. Our current world is filled to the brim with exigences, with tensions, with worries of whether we are taking the right step or not. So let's all vow to tackle our world's problems through constructive conversation. Let's define what we want out of an argument and use nonviolent strategies to get it. Let's uplift good leadership and defend against one littered with fallacies. Let us vow to argue.